Have you ever been just wildly enthusiastic about starting a new project? Maybe a business idea, a serious health goal, or, tackling some complex, demanding hobby.
hmm
And then you watch that excitement just fizzle out, the first sign of hardship or boredom or just life getting busy, and poof, it's gone.
It's the universal human experience,
Yeah.
right? You spend hours, maybe days, drafting the perfect plan. You buy all the gear. You tell everyone you know about this grand new thing you're
Oh,
doing,
yeah, the big announcement.
the big announcement. And then a few weeks later, that revolutionary intention is just silence. It's sitting there collecting dust, this little monument to a moment of fantastic, but at the end of the day, fleeting enthusiasm.
Exactly. And that's the thing. We are absolute masters of the mental blueprint. We're
Mm.
experts at thinking up these amazing ideas, but so often we become these unwilling amateurs when it comes to the hard, grinding work of execution. The second that the amount of actual labor needed becomes startlingly clear, that initial excitement just vanishes. And we let our big, beautiful intentions just sit in the metaphorical or sometimes, the literal garage.
hmm
Today, we are going to do a deep dive into the art of consistently following through and actually finishing what you start. This isn't about generating good ideas, it's about making those intentions a concrete, measurable reality.
And our source material for this deep dive provides the perfect toolkit for making that happen. We're pulling our insights directly from the work of author and researcher Peter Hollins, specifically his book, Finish What You Start, The Art of Following Through, Taking Action, Executing, and Self-Discipline.
I really appreciate that Hollins kicks off the book with his own confession of failure. He tells the story about promising himself he would carve a small wooden canoe. I think it was 12 by 3 inches.
Yeah, a tiny little thing.
Tiny. And he was wildly motivated that first week, but then his hands got sore, life got busy, and suddenly that half-carved wooden boat was just sitting on a workbench in his garage. For years, it became what he called a damning reminder of his laziness.
And that physical reminder is so key, because he only managed to overcome that procrastination years later when he finally learned and applied a really effective strategy, something called temptation bundling.
Okay, temptation bundling, what's that?
He combined the undesirable task, the painful carving of this unfinished canoe, with an instantaneous reward he loved, listening to his favorite albums from start to finish without any interruption.
Ah, so you link the thing you hate with the thing you love.
Exactly. This one small trick turned a massive exercise in pure willpower into something he was actually excited to do. It gave him the push he needed to finally finish what he started.
And that, listeners, sets the perfect stage for the advanced techniques we're about to unpack. But before we dive into the core mechanics of making intentions stick, remember, if you want concise, captivating summaries of the world's best books, make sure to subscribe to the Audible Books channel so you don't miss any of our future deep dives.
So our core mission today is to move past this simple brute force idea that success just requires trying harder.
Right, it's not just about willpower.
Not at all. We need to understand the structural components of consistent follow-through, the psychological landmines that stop us dead in our tracks, and the systems we need to ensure consistency. When Hollins looks at the concept of following through, he argues it's not a single quality. It's a composite of 4 distinct elements, which he compares to a Voltron-like super robot, where each piece is absolutely essential.
Okay, I like that analogy. Let's assemble that powerful machine, because these 4 components are what we're all trying to build in ourselves. So first you have focus, which he calls the head.
The head?
This is all about total clarity, keeping your eyes firmly on the prize. It's about directing all your thoughts and actions toward a single goal to ensure that absolutely no effort is wasted. Without that directional clarity, your energy is just scattered and you're just spinning your wheels.
Right. The second component is self-discipline. He calls this the spine. This is the ability to control yourself, to resist temptations, and consistently exert effort, even when you really don't feel like it. It's the framework that keeps you upright and moving forward, making sure you don't just slump into a mess of fatigue and excuses.
Without the spine, the whole robot just collapses.
It falls apart completely.
Okay, so third is action, the hands and feet. This is the visible, the measurable step. It's prioritizing execution and simple motion that translates a thought and intention into physical reality.
It has to become real.
It has to.
Yeah.
Plans stay abstract and goals remain just dreams without this physical translation. It's the essential truth that any movement is better than perfect stagnation.
And finally, anchoring everything is persistence, which he calls the heart. This is that tenacity, the grit, to adhere firmly to a course of action over a long period of time, even against obstacles, setbacks, and just plain boredom.
And that's a big one, boredom.
It's huge. We have to recognize that most worthwhile goals are marathons, not sprints. Persistence is the deep, enduring cardiovascular fitness you need to run the full length of that race.
So together you have focus, self-discipline, action, and persistence. They combine to form the power of finishing what you start. But if we know the recipe, why do we constantly sabotage ourselves? That takes us directly into understanding the failure points, and that's where we begin to see where our own personal Voltron machine is weakest. It really is astonishing how often we're experts at the thinking phase, but, completely unwilling participants in the action phase. The excitement we feel while planning a new venture, it just fizzles out almost instantaneously as soon as the sheer volume of hard, repetitive, and often really unglamorous work becomes undeniable.
And so often, we invent reasons to stop ourselves before we even need persistence. Hollins gives this great example of a woman named Esther. She hated her desk job. She fantasized about starting her own home baking business for years.
A classic dream.
Absolutely. So she finally took a 2-week vacation, completely determined to begin. But instead of, baking or making sales calls, she decided she needed to get everything figured out first.
Oh, the planning trap.
The planning trap. Finance management, taxes, business filings, lease requirements.
And all of that extensive planning, I'm guessing, stayed entirely in her head.
100%. The thought of having to learn all those complex bureaucratic things just completely overwhelmed her. She became paralyzed by it. She decided the amount of research was just too large to tackle in 2 weeks.
So what did she do with her 2 weeks off?
She spent her vacation sleeping in, doting on her son, and doing totally unrelated home projects.
She stopped before she ever truly began.
That's the crucial point. So many people fail, not because they lack persistence when they hit a hard wall, but because they are paralyzed by the perceived volume of work before they even take the first measurable, easy step. Her lack of action meant her persistence was never even tested.
So the sources categorize these failure mechanisms into 2 big camps: inhibiting tactics and psychological roadblocks. And these inhibiting tactics are often conscious schemes for misusing our time and effort that just guarantee self-sabotage.
The first one he points to is setting bad goals. And there are 2 major ways we mess this up. First, the goal is just too abstract.
Like, be healthier.
Exactly. Be healthier with no definition. What does that mean? Does it mean run 2 miles a day? Does it mean eat 5 servings of vegetables? When the goal is confusing, the necessary action is totally unclear, so you do nothing.
Okay, so that's the first way. What's the second?
The second way is setting a goal that is way too high or completely unrealistic, and this one is much sneakier. Well, if a plant manager aims to double his manufacturing output, even though he knows the logistical and equipment limits make that scientifically impossible, then failing actually absolves him of guilt.
Because it was never possible in the first place.
Right. The goal was impossible anyway. So he saved himself the trouble of trying hard, and he doesn't feel any guilt because his failure was basically predetermined. It's an intellectual self-soothing mechanism.
That's clever in a self-defeating way.
It really is. And next up is the big one, procrastination, the most famous inhibiting tactic. We're all incredibly talented at delaying work until the last minute, usually because we want to avoid some kind of immediate discomfort. But the truly insidious version of this is what he calls productive procrastination.
Oh, I think I know this one. This is when you do busy work that feels related to the goal, but it isn't actual forward movement.
You nailed it. You might spend all day reorganizing your digital folders or updating the font on your website or, planning an appendix for a report you haven't even started writing yet.
It feels like progress. You feel like you're working hard.
You do.
No.
But you're just moving in place. You're using up energy and time, but you've turned a lifetime string of laters into the noose of never. This is a fundamental failure of focus.
Right. And then there's the constant challenge of just indulging in temptations and distractions. Our modern world is actively designed to distract us. That simple red notification alert on your phone immediately floods your brain with dopamine.
The little reward chemical.
The feel-good chemicals that keep you glued to the screen, hijacking your attention away from the difficult long-term work you're supposed to be doing.
You can look at the example of the marketing officer who used to work these 10-hour days that were just riddled with Snapchat, YouTube binges, endless Instagram scrolls. She was exhausted at the end of the day.
Sure, because that stuff is draining.
It's very draining. But her reports, while they were done, they weren't reflective of her true potential. She was constantly eroding her self-discipline. The solution isn't just banning technology, but strategic avoidance scheduling, specific blocks of time where you're logged out, or rewarding yourself with a 10-minute distraction break after you complete a solid chunk of work.
And finally, under this category, we have just poor time management. This
Yeah.
really stems from a core lack of planning, organization, and focus. We consistently miscalculate how long tasks will take.
Oh, always. I can write that essay in 2 hours.
Right, when it really needs 4.
Yeah.
And that leads to unavoidable delays and cancellations. But I think the most damaging part is that we fail to prioritize. We choose non-essential, often urgent tasks over the truly crucial ones that align with our long-term goals.
We're living in this demanding, tech-heavy century where technology allows us to work constantly, but it also offers infinite entertainment options. If you can't manage your day-to-day schedule and accurately judge where your time is actually going, how could you possibly expect to find the bandwidth to follow through on your bigger life plans?
And that mismanagement of time often connects directly to the second category of failure, psychological roadblocks. These are internal, often unconscious mechanisms that act as these deep barriers to follow through, and they're usually driven by some form of self-protection.
Sometimes the reason is just simple laziness and lack of discipline. A simple refusal to expend energy because we've done the quick math in our head and decided the required sacrifice is not worth it in that moment.
Right, so we just squander our time until we run out of it,
Right.
and then we blame external factors instead of our own internal resistance.
Exactly. But a more complex one is the paralyzing fear of judgment, rejection, and failure. Think about Laura, this woman who wanted to start a charity campaign for local homelessness, but she hesitated for weeks.
What was she afraid of?
What if the campaign just flopped? What if community leaders refused to back it? The fear of that public failure became so intense that she just dropped the entire idea, and she felt immediate relief.
It's so fascinating how not following through in that case became an act of self-preservation for her. It saved her from the possibility of public pain.
But it's a deeply ruinous distortion in your reasoning. By choosing inaction, you've already judged and rejected yourself. You have failed the moment you decided not to even try.
This often shows up as perfectionism out of insecurity. We saw this with Paul, who wanted a promotion but delayed applying for years and years. He kept upgrading his credentials, attending seminars, taking more classes because his qualifications didn't feel good enough,
He was always waiting for that magical moment when he was 100% ready.
which never comes.
It never comes. That type of perfectionism, the kind rooted in insecurity, it redirects your energy away from action and into overplanning. Paul looked like a busy bee, constantly learning, constantly preparing, but he was inhibited from truly moving forward. He was busy, but he wasn't advancing. It's a busy appearance without true action or true focus on the actual goal, which was getting the promotion.
And the final roadblock is a general lack of self-awareness. Because we're constantly afraid of making mistakes and venturing past our comfort zones, we never push hard enough to truly learn the fullest extent of our own capacities, our passions, or our talents. We just don't know what we're capable of.
And if you don't know your true potential, you remain convinced deep down that you'll never succeed. And this traps you in a lifetime of stagnation without even realizing that's the underlying cause,
So you think you're failing because the task is hard.
right? When in fact, you're failing because you don't trust yourself to finish. The key here, as Hollins suggests, is realizing that following through is definitely the more difficult path, but it's the one that builds personal trust and forces you into closer touch with your own real wants and needs. So understanding the roadblocks is absolutely essential. But next, we need to talk about the fuel you need to overcome them, and that's motivation. Most people, like this woman Sally, they rely solely on passion. Sally, the idealist, started a wonderful charity, but she quit within a few months
Okay, why? What happened?
because she completely failed to anticipate and plan for the negative aspects. The unglamorous tasks of procuring funding, dealing with intense competition for grants, and writing these tedious, awful grant letters.
Right. She realized she hated the administrative side of the business, even though she deeply cared about the cause itself.
Exactly. Her passion wasn't the problem. It was her reliance on passion alone without planning for the necessary grind. She was powered by sunshine, but she ran headfirst into a blizzard.
So to cultivate a more resilient motivation, Hollins suggests you have to consciously connect 3 aspects. 1, what the goal fundamentally represents. 2, the positive benefits you get from your actions. And 3, the negative consequences you can avoid.
In essence, you have to be constantly minimizing the negative emotions while you're simultaneously maximizing the positive ones.
And we can break down motivation into external, which is the stick, and internal, the carrot. So external motivators are driven by outside sources, people, or circumstances, and their power often comes from aiming to avoid a negative consequence. We hate suffering, so if not following through results in suffering, we'll act.
The most common external stick is using accountability partners or groups. The motivation here is rooted in avoiding the negative social emissions of shame, guilt, or rejection from your partner, or, even more powerfully, that exponential shame you feel in a group setting.
So they're there to kind of chide you when you want to give up. They're effectively weaponizing your ego against your own laziness.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Then you've got putting money down. The risk of losing money is an astonishingly powerful motivator. Paying for an expensive upfront gym membership pushes you to go because you don't want to waste the fee. The primary driver there isn't health. It's guilt over the wasted financial investment.
And you can take that monetary stick to the next level by hiring a coach or a trainer. This combines the money part with the accountability part. Now you have two reasons not to back out, and a third party is actively managing your progress.
The book mentions escalating this even further, right? Giving a friend a large sum of money and telling them not to return it until you complete a task.
Yeah, that's the extreme version. It very quickly reveals how much your work ethic is actually worth to you in cold, hard cash.
We also have self-bribery. This is promising yourself a significant reward upon completion, say, a dream beach vacation or a new watch to help you surmount the current difficulties. The reward has to be kept really salient in your mind to avoid spending your time or money on smaller, more immediate distractions.
And while these external motivators mostly revolve around avoiding pain, the most uniform and resilient type of drive really comes from internal motivators, the carrot. This is about what you truly want. It speaks directly to your universal needs and deep personal desires, and it tends to be far more resilient than motivation that's just driven by external fear.
To articulate these internal motivators, you have to sit down and answer some direct, challenging questions. What deep fulfillment are you getting out of this? Is it money, happiness, mastering a skill? How will your life fundamentally change for the better? A better home, a nicer car, recovering from chronic depression?
And you have to go deeper. How will your family benefit from this? A safer neighborhood, private school for the kids? What impact will you have on other people? Will you be a role model? Will you do charity work? And crucially, what positive emotions will you gain? Pride, deep self-esteem.
Right. Focusing on those benefits every day helps you follow through, even when you hate a specific task. You're constantly reminding yourself how that one small, boring thing ties into the fulfillment of your grandest goals. You're creating a direct psychological link between the present pain and the future gain.
But following through is never free. It always requires sacrifice of money, of effort, of time. And this sacrifice is known as opportunity cost. If that cost overshadows the potential goal, you simply won't follow through. Everything you do takes away time or effort that could have been committed to something else.
So the key realization here is that if the opportunity cost is too expensive for you to want to pay it, you're going to sabotage your own efforts.
Absolutely. Therefore, we have to find a way to actively manipulate that cost-benefit ratio. And Hollins suggests two main solutions.
Okay, what's solution one?
Maximize the benefit. The internal and external motivation has to be so powerful and so salient that it makes you willingly ignore the things you're missing out on. For example, your powerful desire for a dream career, which requires late-night class, that has to significantly outweigh how much you miss your weekly Friday night out with friends. The benefit has to feel enormous compared to the cost.
And solution two is to minimize the sacrifice cost. So instead of giving up your Friday night out entirely, you look for a compromise. You schedule a shorter outing after class, or you rally the energy to go out a little later.
You're turning a full, agonizing sacrifice into a compromised, less painful one. You're making the necessary work less psychologically costly and thus easier to accept. You're lowering the emotional price of entry.
But this only works if your motivators are constantly top of mind. They can't be out of sight, out of mind. Psychological studies show that people are vastly more inclined to follow through when they're reminded of their motivators through salient cues.
There's a fantastic illustration of this from a study by a researcher named Catherine Milkman. Participants had to complete an hour-long task and were asked to pick up paper clips for a donation when they got their compensation. The test group was told the paper clips would be by a very distinctive object, an elephant statue.
Just a little elephant statue.
And that small visual cue was incredibly effective.
Unbelievably so. 74% of the group told about the elephant statue remembered to get their paper clips versus only 42% for the control group.
Wow.
Yeah. Noticeable, vivid cues work best. A subtle post-it note is easily ignored, but a unique, vivid cue, like an elephant statue, sticks in your memory and triggers the action.
So therefore, you have to use loud, vivid, often sensory cues that connect you immediately to your goal. Don't just rely on visual reminders. Employ other senses, sounds, textures, or scents. Right. For example, you might place a picture of your child on your desk to link your work to your financial goals. But to make it vivid, you make sure the picture frame smells like your child's favorite shampoo or your spouse's signature perfume. You're creating this multisensory trigger for action.
And the necessity of change is vital here. You have to move and change these cues periodically. If the elephant statue sits in the exact same spot for 2 months, it just becomes part of the furniture.
It blends in.
Exactly. You have to actively refresh the cues to prevent them from blending into the background noise of your life and being ignored.
We have to acknowledge a fundamental truth here. Willpower is finite. It's a limited resource. You constantly face these forks in the road where you have to deliberate between following through or giving up.
And if you have to reach deep into your willpower toolkit every single time you face one of those choices, you will eventually experience decision fatigue. You will fail.
Absolutely. The solution is creating a manifesto, a set of rules or mental models that pre-make those decisions for you.
So the rules are critical because they limit your vision and they basically tie your hands to action. They remove the option to give up because your self-discipline is waning.
Think about the example of John the writer. When he decided each day whether he felt motivated enough to write 2 chapters, he consistently failed. Fatigue or the latest Netflix show would always win.
But when he implemented the strict rule to always complete 2 chapters a night after work, regardless of how tired or uninspired he felt, he succeeded easily. Why?
The choice was out of his hands. He no longer had room for deliberation. The rule made the task black and white. It was a mandatory requirement, not an option dependent on his fleeting mood.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these effective rules for a personal manifesto. Rule 1. Evaluate yourself. When you want to quit, you pause and you ask the difficult question. If not for laziness or fear, would I be giving up right now?
This rule is psychologically powerful because it forces you to confront the easy way out. It's that essential kick in the butt that makes you admit, at least to yourself, that your inaction is rooted in a character flaw, laziness, or fear, which you then strive to overcome.
Right. If you realize that only fear is standing in your way, you're more likely to push through it than if you just blame being too tired or not having enough time.
Rule 2. 3 tasks maximum. We often feel paralyzed and overwhelmed by these endless, sprawling to-do lists. This rule combats that feeling by forcing you to focus on only 3 major things a day maximum. The night before, you clearly define what those 3 critical actions will be.
And this requires some serious self-discipline and critical differentiation. You have to distinguish between important things, which must be done and align directly with your goals, and urgent things.
And the urgent things are the tricky ones. They seem important, they cause stress, like a client rushing you for a non-critical update, but they aren't actually necessary for your long-term success.
You also have to differentiate between what he calls useless motion and actual action. Useless motion is the busy work shifting papers, cleaning up digital files. Actual action is movement toward your goals, writing the difficult chapter, making the key sales call.
By committing to just 3 tasks, you prioritize actual action, and you stop fooling yourself into thinking you're making progress when you're only just moving in place.
Okay, rule 3. Create limitations and requirements. This means writing a detailed, visible code of conduct for yourself. Limitations are boundaries that limit distractions, like not more than 1 hour of non-work social media per day.
And requirements focus on reasonably meetable actions, like read 30 pages of industry literature a day, or complete 8 hours of focused work. This just forces absolute clarity on what you must do and what you must not do, and it builds the scaffolding for good habits.
Then there's rule 4. Reaffirm your intentions. This rule comes into play when you're standing at that fork in the road and you're tempted to quit. Use 3 clarifying statements.
First, I want. You state the end goal and the deepest motivation. I want to be rich and afford a nicer home and a safer neighborhood for my family.
Second, I will. You state the necessary actions that lead to that goal. I will finish this difficult project today and work hard on all subsequent projects.
And third, I won't. You state the detrimental actions to avoid. I won't distract myself with social media or allow overthinking to paralyze me. This constant verbal repetition helps maintain presence of mind. The path forward and the pitfalls to avoid become crystal clear, protecting your focus right when it begins to drift.
Okay, what about rule 5? Think in terms of 10-10-10. When you're tempted to lapse, to skip the gym, to eat the forbidden food, to put off that hard email, you ask yourself how you'll feel 10 minutes, 10 hours, and 10 days from now.
This rule is all about creating a quick, powerful connection to your future self, the one who will have to deal with the consequences of your present decision. The time intervals are chosen specifically to highlight the short-term nature of instant pleasure relative to its long-term cost.
So 10 minutes from now, it might feel good. You can still taste the lasagna.
Right. But 10 hours later, that immediate pleasure is completely gone and regret is creeping in. 10 days later, the broken discipline is meaningless, but the lasting cost to your goal remains.
I do worry about the risk here, though. What if a person has a history of repeated failure after just a single lapse? Can the 10-10-10 rule actually backfire if they rationalize away the 10-day regret?
That's where the honesty of Rule 1 has to kick in. You have to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. If you know that one lapse leads to a 6-month collapse of your diet, then the 10-day regret has to be magnified in your mind. The rule works best when it confirms a known consequence. If the cost of the lasagna is a severe psychological spiral, then 10-10-10 just confirms that you absolutely cannot afford that short-term comfort.
Okay, that makes sense. Finally, we have the simple, powerful, and essential Rule 6. Just 10 minutes. If you want something negative or detrimental like checking social media or getting up to grab a snack, you wait 10 minutes before giving in.
And conversely, if you want to quit something beneficial like writing or running, you wait 10 more minutes.
The goal here is to sever the immediate link from immediate gratification.
Exactly. 10 minutes is a small psychological hurdle, so you can easily do it once. If you survive that 10 minutes, it's easier to repeat it. Every time you feel distracted or want to quit, you're exercising willpower for just a few minutes longer, building discipline in these small, repeatable acts until you achieve the momentum that can carry you for hours.
So we've established that follow-through is, it's 100% mental. It requires cognitive effort and a really resilient outlook, especially when obstacles pop up. Take Gerald, for instance. He aspired to be a rich entrepreneur, but when he actually started his consulting business, the reality of execution just caused intense fear and discomfort.
He had to make a significant monetary investment, which terrified him because, he might lose the money. He hated cutting back on luxuries and evening fun to devote money and time to the startup. Because success required navigating these uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and potentially scary situations, Gerald just freaked out.
And he decided the necessary lifestyle changes just weren't worth the discomfort, and he settled back into the comfortable desk job he secretly hated.
Gerald focused exclusively on the negative cost and refused to work around the discomfort. Had he adopted a mindset of consistency, realizing discomfort is necessary for growth, he wouldn't have given up just because the going got tough. And that leads us to the essential psychological frameworks we have to adopt.
So, mindset 1, it's worthwhile. Educational studies on student perseverance offer 3 concepts that transfer directly to adult success. First, this core belief that hard work will lead to improvement, that it's a prerequisite, not just luck or innate talent, and this directly fuels both action and persistence.
Second, you have to have the confidence that you belong and that you are capable. This means rejecting those self-limiting beliefs that tell you you aren't smart enough or experienced enough. You have to believe in yourself and your abilities.
And third, holding the belief that what you are doing is valuable and relevant to your overall goals. Why would you stick with something if you don't see how it benefits you? If you're stuck studying some pointless prerequisite class, you have to remind yourself that the class leads to graduation, which in turn leads to the dream career. Assigning value and meaning to the grind makes the daily effort seem worthwhile.
Mindset 2, comfort with discomfort. Following through inevitably asks you to do things that are unfamiliar, scary, or just plain boring. Avoiding discomfort is, quite literally, actively shutting out success. If you only operate within your comfort zone, you guarantee stagnation.
So this is a form of self-directed exposure therapy. You have to overcome that instinct to avoid things just because they're momentarily uncomfortable.
It's a temporary emotion. Discomfort is a temporary emotion that leaves with exposure and practice. The more you intentionally step outside your comfort zone, learning new skills, talking to new people, pitching difficult ideas, the more conditioned you become until you stop fearing the discomfort itself.
Then there's mindset 3, allow learning. You have to view every endeavor, whether it's successful or unsuccessful, as a quest for knowledge and self-evaluation. Giving up early is an automatic total failure. Finishing, even if the goal isn't met perfectly, provides valuable learning, new skills, and information that you can apply to your next attempt.
You only learn the full scope of a project if you see it through to the end. And viewing endeavors this way immediately takes the fear out of failure because you still gain knowledge capital. You're less inclined to give up when you're faced with a challenge because you want to learn how to work around it and gain that skill.
So you just ask, what can I learn from this failure or this difficulty? And that breeds a powerful thirst for knowledge, enabling greater persistence.
Exactly. And mindset 4, de-stress. This is so crucial for maintaining your self-discipline. Stress and fatigue dramatically deplete your willpower and your self-control. An Australian study showed that stressed students neglected their healthy habits, they struggled to control their emotions, and they reduced their attention to their commitments.
Negative emotions, which are often called affect, are the most important triggers of self-control failure. Emotionally distressed people seek immediate gratification and they procrastinate. Emotional distress causes this shift toward immediate improvements in mood, which leads to poor decisions.
Like grabbing a cookie when you're stressed, even if you plan to diet.
Exactly. And this psychological failure is made worse by something called projection bias. This is where people falsely project their current mood or emotional state onto their future feelings.
So if you plan a strict diet when you're calm, rested, and you just ate, you fail to anticipate how desperately you're going to crave cookies when you're hungry, stressed, and tired later that evening.
Correcting for that projection bias requires proactive management of your mood and your energy. Hollins suggests spending at least 30 minutes every day on relaxing activities like reading, meditating, exercise, or even cuddling.
And crucially, spending time doing absolutely nothing can allow your mind to emit alpha waves, which trigger increased happiness and mental recovery. Think of it not as wasted time, but as mental recovery, similar to how an athlete rests between competitive matches. You're priming your mind for peak cognitive performance when you need to think creatively or exercise focus. So we've explored motivation and mindset, but to truly follow through, we need systems that force execution. Procrastination is largely driven by what's called time inconsistency. Our present self values immediate gratification, a nap, a snack, a break over the long-term rewards sought by our future self, like money or goal completion.
The present self is constantly stealing from the future self.
It is. And to beat it, we need systems that move those future long-term rewards into the present.
We saw this with Madeline the coder. She kept delaying her project, promising herself she'd make up for it by doing 30, then 45 pages of code later, which of course resulted in a rush job riddled with errors. Her present self continually overrode her future self's needs.
And you can contrast her with Michelle, who used deliberate systems to succeed. And this brings us to strategy 1, temptation bundling. This is the method Hollins used to finally finish carving his canoe. It directly counteracts time inconsistency by pairing an obligatory difficult task with an instantaneous reward or pleasure.
Right, Katie Milkman's research found that up to 51% of participants were more willing to exercise when they used temptation bundling. The examples are straightforward and easy to implement. Working out while exclusively watching a favorite TV show, working on admin tasks while listening to a favorite album.
Or even eating a favorite treat while doing an undesirable chore. You don't have to suffer in the present if you can blend pleasure with obligation.
Okay, strategy 2, small, easy increments. Procrastination thrives off inertia, the physical force of rest. The goal is to break that inertia quickly and gain momentum.
You have to break tasks into these minuscule, palatable components. A 100-page paper becomes a series of 100-word paragraphs. A major house cleaning becomes tackling just one sink or one drawer.
The key is starting with the easiest tasks first, like the outline and research, before you tackle the actual writing. This proves to your mind that the task is possible and attainable, and it lets you gain that crucial initial momentum before you tackle the hard, uncomfortable parts. The barrier to starting becomes extremely low, making action almost effortless at first.
Strategy 3, productive paranoia, considering risks. Jim Collins studied this tactic used by successful leaders like Bill Gates, where hypervigilance about what might go wrong becomes a powerful motivator. Fear, if you use it in small, safe doses, can kick you into overdrive.
So you ask yourself, how might I lose out if I delay action right now? The fear of missing an opportunity, or losing a client, or realizing a competitor got ahead of you can motivate you far more than just generalized ambition.
Procrastination comes from boredom and complacency. Stripping those feelings away with a hint of paranoia spurs necessary action.
Okay, strategy 4. Designing a no distraction zone. Distractions are catastrophic for your willpower. The Bubba Shiv study showed that distracted people trying to remember a phone number, they chose chocolate cake 50% more often than the focused group. Distractions actively deplete our limited self-discipline resources.
So we have to intentionally use the out of sight, out of mind concept. A Cornell study demonstrated that subjects reported eating fewer kisses when the jars were opaque and 6 feet away.
Yeah,
You have to exploit your own natural laziness.
right. If a temptation requires effort like getting up to move the cookie jar to a distant cabinet, it's less likely to happen. Your workplace, your desk, your computer desktop, they all have to be ruthlessly clear of obvious temptations to protect your focus.
And that leads to strategy 5, defaulting to positive behaviors. This strategy also exploits human laziness by making the desired path the one of least resistance, the default option. The organ donor example is perfect for this. Countries with automatic opt-in had 95% plus participation.
Versus 27% where citizens had to actively opt in. People just follow the path of least resistance.
So we applied this by optimizing our environment for success. You move distracting apps to the back page of your phone, you log out after you use them, or you place your phone face down out of reach. Conversely, you put your exercise equipment or your study materials or a musical instrument in plain sight where you encounter it frequently. You save precious willpower by making positive choices the default action.
Okay, what about strategy 6? Single tasking and batching. This feels critical for the modern worker.
It is. Modern sequential project switching is nearly as bad as multitasking because of something called attention residue. When you switch from task A, say email, to task B, creative writing, a residue of your attention remains stuck on the original task, and it severely diminishes your performance on the new one.
And how long does that residue last? Does this mean even checking a Slack message for 30 seconds can ruin the next 15 minutes of deep work?
Exactly. The residue can last for a significant amount of time. That's why single tasking is the solution. Focusing singularly on the current task, purposefully tuning out everything else, notifications off, only one browser tab open. If an unrelated idea pops into your head, you quickly use a Post-it or a scratch pad to jot it down for later, preventing that idea from triggering an attention switch.
And that's where batching comes in. You group similar tasks together to capitalize on mental efficiency, like Henry Ford's assembly line. Instead of checking emails and responding to messages scattershot throughout the day, which keeps you in a constant state of attention residue, you batch them.
For example, checking emails only at the top of every 2 hours. This allows you to stay in one specific mindset reading and composing email before switching entirely to a different, focused mindset, like writing or design. You can even batch your distractions. Take one solid block of time for all your social media and coffee breaks so the rest of your workday is dedicated solely to high-value action.
Okay, strategy 7, the don't-do list. This is as powerful as the to-do list, focusing on what you should ignore to prevent your energy from dissipating. What tasks are actively stealing your time and undermining your goals?
There are 3 critical categories to ignore. 1, tasks waiting for external feedback. The ball is in someone else's court, so don't waste mental energy thinking about them. 2, tasks that don't add value or are just trivial busy work like choosing the perfect font for an internal memo that will be deleted tomorrow. Delegate them or skip them. And 3, tasks that will not benefit from additional attention because they're already at 80% quality or higher. Avoid that perfectionist polishing trap.
But doesn't actively ignoring tasks, especially those related to external feedback, create anxiety about client relationships or deadlines?
That's the tension. And Hollins clarifies this is about mental energy. You should still track the waiting tasks, but you have to prevent rumination. If a client hasn't responded, you've done your part. Worrying about their response falls under a different pitfall we'll discuss. The don't-do list is about conserving your at. Focus for controllable, high-value tasks, not ignoring your responsibilities entirely.
Okay. Strategy 8, the 40-70 rule. This directly combats analysis paralysis. Former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell popularized this idea. When you're facing a hard choice, have no less than 40% and no more than 70% of the information needed to act.
Less than 40% is shooting from the hip, and that's inviting catastrophe. But more than 70% risks getting overwhelmed, losing your resolve, or losing the opportunity entirely to someone who acted faster. The 40 to 70% sweet spot allows your intuition to guide the decision, pushing you toward action before you feel 100% ready.
Wait, the source suggests we should act on just 40% information, allowing intuition to guide us. That sounds like a recipe for rushing projects and potentially wasting time if we choose the wrong path entirely. How does Hollins defend the risk that's associated with that low percentage?
He argues that the risk of stagnation, of waiting until you have 90% of the information and missing the opportunity window, is far greater than the risk of making an imperfect but reversible decision at 40%. The 40% isn't just guesswork, it's having the essential foundational data. The goal is rapid action based on sufficient data, not perfect data. If you have the three most important pieces of information, you have to trust your internal compass.
And finally, strategy 9, do nothing. Mental recovery. This is a little counterintuitive when we're focusing on constant execution, but burnout is a real risk. Ironically, disconnecting completely and doing nothing can lead to greater creativity and insight.
Thought is fatiguing. It's characterized by high-frequency beta waves. Relaxation and doing nothing, often during periods like showering or taking a walk, are characterized by slower alpha waves, which trigger increased happiness, reduce stress, and mental recovery. Think of this as forced recovery, priming your mind to work at peak focus when you return to the task.
Even with all the right systems, psychological traps are abundant. We need to be able to self-diagnose what went wrong when we fail. Let's look again at Michael, who started his freelance consulting firm. His biggest mistake was immediately succumbing to false expectations.
Michael expected starting his business would immediately transform his life overnight. He thought he'd have tons of money, minimal work, and time to get pumped up like a movie star. Weeks went by, and the reality, the grind, the minimal returns, the late nights, made his extreme expectations feel intimidating and discouraging.
This is pitfall 1, false hope syndrome. You massively overestimate the changes you can make, the speed, the number, and the ease of those changes. Michael expected his personality, his schedule, and his bank account to just magically flip a switch.
And those unrealistic expectations lead to massive disappointment and a powerful emotional backlash that leaves you less motivated than when you started. The solution is setting proper, attainable expectations based on your documented history, understanding the difference between a massive goal where you want to go and a realistic expectation of how fast you can actually get there.
Okay, pitfall 2, overthinking. This is a silent killer because it mimics progress. You're researching, planning, optimizing, but it's actually wasted motion that leads to analysis paralysis. It exhausts your cognitive energy before you even begin to take action.
Psychologist Barry Schwartz noted the paradox of choice is harmful because having too many options just overwhelms the brain. If you stand before a wall of printers all boasting great features, you panic and you can't settle on one. You waste hours on research only to be paralyzed by the choice itself.
The solution is to place the emphasis on action, recognizing that most actions are reversible, and limiting your choices and your criteria. If you need a new printer, you determine the 3 essential traits, say speed, color, and size. Then you buy the cheapest one that meets those needs. You limit your information intake, which is an intentional act of simplification that leads to clarity and execution.
Then there's pitfall 3, worry. Worrying is just ruminating on problems, real or imagined, especially those that are outside your immediate control. This steals your composure by focusing on the uncontrollable future or past rather than the controllable present.
Worrying causes you to suffer twice, once during the rumination and then again if the dreaded event actually occurs. It can easily masquerade as productivity. You feel like you're working out the problem.
But it's just wasted motion that depletes your focus. The solution is to adopt a mindset of action and focus only on what you can do right now. That empowers you because you're channeling your mental energy toward controllable real steps, and you're thereby conserving the mental resources that worry so aggressively steals.
And finally, pitfall 4, ignoring know thyself. This is failing to understand your own best working conditions, whether that's your peak time of day, the specific environment you need, or your need for routine versus spontaneity. Michael, who struggled with early mornings because of his newborn, he realized he just wasn't a morning person.
He was trying to force a system on himself that was fundamentally unsuitable for his life. By self-diagnosing and adjusting his schedule to align with his natural energy cycle working, later, but with intense focus, he started thriving. He changed the schedule, not the goal.
And this self-diagnosis is the crucial final component. We have to be able to look at ourselves and deduce why we're failing. Are you endlessly reading a time management book when you should be organizing? Or are you over-organizing when you simply have too much unnecessary stuff?
Failure is useful only when you are self-aware of its precise cause. That allows you to stop repeating the same mistake over and over again.
We've covered a lot of ground in understanding the art of finishing what you start. This deep dive has shown us that execution is a composite skill, not just a matter of trying harder.
Following through is built on that Voltron-like power of focus, self-discipline, action, and persistence. And we fail due to clear barriers, inhibiting tactics like setting bad goals and productive procrastination, and psychological roadblocks like fear, perfectionism, and projection bias.
We learn to overcome inertia by manipulating the cost-benefit ratio of motivation, using both external motivators like accountability and the risk of losing money, and internal motivators that connect your effort to deep personal benefits. We have to constantly manage our opportunity costs.
And to conserve our precious, finite willpower, we have to create a manifesto of rules. These include the psychological mirror of Rule 1, the executive function of 3 tasks maximum, the future-oriented calculation of the 10-10-10 rule, and the immediate gratification breaker, just 10 minutes.
The environment matters tremendously. We have to minimize distractions by creating a no-distraction zone where temptations are out of sight. We have to set positive default actions to exploit our own natural laziness. And to combat attention residue, we rely on the synergy of single tasking and batching similar tasks together.
Finally, we avoid those deadly pitfalls by setting realistic expectations to counter false hope syndrome, emphasizing action, even at 40% information, over the time-wasting motion of overthinking and worry, and cultivating intense self-awareness to align our habits with our personal best working conditions.
The rewards are exponential. Following through increases your productivity, it maximizes your opportunities, and it builds deep, self-sustaining trust in your relationships and, most importantly, in yourself. It creates the life you truly want instead of the life you currently have.
We learned that the author, Peter Hollins, used temptation bundling to finally finish his great, unfinished wooden canoe, pairing the highly undesirable task of carving with the immediate reward of listening to his favorite album uninterrupted. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What is the one most instant and pleasurable reward you are currently depriving yourself of, and how can you bundle it with the task you most consistently procrastinate on, starting today?
Thank you for sharing your source material for this deep dive into execution and discipline. We encourage you to apply these rules and systems immediately, starting with one small, easy increment. We'll talk to you next time.